Creating an efficient roster in DC Dark Legion is a difficult task, and it's difficult for several reasons. The first one being there's not really an easy way to farm older shards of champions that you no longer have access to. So the way the acquisition of the higher level champions, so your limited mythic champions, or what we like to call mythic plus, the way you get those champions is through pulling them in the bleed. And a champion is only available in the bleed for about 30 days. There's overlap with other champions, before and after. So you're kind of stuck choosing between, two champions at any given time that you want to be pulling for. And once that champion is out of the bleed, there's really no way for you to obtain them unless that champion rolls back around for a rerun of their banner or something else. And what we've seen so far, especially with the game only being out global for about 4, maybe a little bit less than 4 months, but we've kind of seen it out in soft launch since the beginning of this year, is that if you start with Superman, getting to the end of the currently available banner champions, it's going to take you like 5 or 6 months to get there. So I would say reasonable expectation is that once a champion leaves the bleed, you're probably not going to have a second shot at them for 5 to 6 months unless they drastically change the way they're doing things. We do expect to see, as of the filming of this video, the first rerun of Superman on the earliest servers in the game, so 200 through 205. And I'm really excited about that personally. I know a lot of people are looking forward to having a second chance at pulling for Superman. And, I'm curious, it seems like they're probably going to do a separate banner for that. So you may need a separate resource, like a separate anvil or something like that you would be pulling Superman with. That's something that was in the beta of the game. And I think it's something that is needed as we push forward into kind of the new chapter of the game's development, is multiple ways to build your roster, to choose which champions you want to go for. And the other thing that kind of makes it difficult to build your roster, though, is we did have kind of a bleed calendar that showed you, hey, this is everything that has been available in the past. And it kind of gives you a rubric or an idea for how to build your account over time. That has been removed from the official Discord. And so the expectation, I think, going forward is that we're just going to have to, as a community, put something together so that we can establish a bleed calendar that might be mostly accurate. Obviously, the developers seem to want to make some changes and adjustments over time. So we'll have to monitor and make sure that this advice would count for or matter for new players, months down the road. But that's something that I can worry about in a future video. For now, I want to introduce to you guys, it's been a labor of love, but I've put together kind of a bleed calendar infographic with several different options that you can choose, paths that you can choose to build your account if you're starting from scratch. I know this infographic is going to be hard for you to see on this video, but as always with my infographics, you'll have access to a free version that you can download from the official Discord or from my Discord server. Now, I realize how dense this graphic looks, and it's definitely going to be a little bit daunting for you probably when you first get into it. I'm going to try to dispel a little bit of that as we look through the graphic on this video. This is meant to be one of those things that you kind of always reference back to, and I'm looking at making some kind of follow-up graphics to this one where I break down some of these specific team recommendations. Obviously, this is the first time I'm doing this bleed strategy guide, and it's a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and I imagine that my recommendations will actually change fairly rapidly as we move forward. I'd love for people to leave comments on this video or shoot me a DM on Discord if you have any constructive feedback. If you feel like anything here is unrealistic, obviously if you are keeping track of what you've pulled for and you already have kind of an efficient strategy that you've been utilizing that has worked for you, I'd love to hear that. I'd love to incorporate some of that into future versions of this guide. I may end up reducing the amount of recommended paths, or maybe increasing the amount of recommended paths based on what I hear over the next month or so. So why do you need to follow a bleed calendar? Well, pretty simple. If you've ever played a game like this, so a mobile gotcha game, you know that in order to succeed in these types of games, you need a plan and you need to conserve a lot of resources. I think most non-spenders and light spenders playing DC Dark Legion can probably afford to build about 10 to 15 champions in the first 6 months that they're playing. And when you're building those champions, you have to consider combat cycle, training simulator, PvP, so meta brawl and 3v3 strategic challenge, as well as your ACN network. So the idea behind putting together a bleed strategy guide or a bleed calendar guide like this is to try to help you pick the most important bleed limited mythic champions to focus all of your anvils on. And for very new players, anvils are one of the most important resources that you're going to be utilizing. They allow you to pull for some of these limited champions that are only around for a little while. Now, one thing I want to preface before we start looking at some of these recommended builds is there is no guarantee that you're going to get these champions to the star level that you want. Unfortunate reality here is that skipping champions is the way to at least give you a chance at success. And this guide is made for non-spenders and light spenders who know that they're not going to get all the champions unlocked at a usable level. And in some cases, you're not going to get the champion unlocked at all unless you're just a collector. In which case, again, this guide is probably not made for you because you're not going to be able to collect about half the champions that come to the game. Now, you'll notice a bunch of icons on this calendar, and we'll talk about each of those icons, and I'll give you kind of the key that's listed on the full graphic that you saw a few minutes ago. But I'll kind of talk you through a little bit of what those things mean and kind of how you should be utilizing that. So the first thing is, while there are some champions I recommend that you should pull as high as you can, there is kind of a limit. So if you feel like pulling a champion as high as you can go would cause you to overspend your anvils and not be able to execute on the rest of the calendar, then the fallback is always to stop a little bit short of where I recommended that you go to. So the champions that I'm saying pull as high as you can, probably like 1 purple or 3 purple is plenty far enough. If you feel like you're basically out of anvils or that you're not going to have enough anvils to kind of move to the next champion in the list. And then there are going to be some lesser recommendations. So you got the little purple star here. You can also get by with pulling champions like Zatanna, Scarecrow, Martian Manhunter, maybe Superboy to 5 white or 3 blue stars and stopping. And that gives you another way to conserve your anvils for a big push for champions like Sinestro, Constantine, Nightwing, Superman, which are kind of like the win conditions for the teams that you're going to be trying to build. The last thing I will say about this specific infographic, and I include a little disclaimer on the full graphic, is that Hawkgirl historically appeared between Constantine and Nightwing. She didn't appear in that spot for Global Launch 206 Plus servers, and we don't really know when she's going to reappear in the bleed. The assumption is that she would potentially come back to the bleed after the Superboy banner is over or whenever it gets to about 14 days left, but we're not really sure. She might end up being pushed back behind Martian Manhunter and Starfire, or they may put her somewhere else in the bleed altogether. So I'm not really sure why they made this change, like what metrics they were looking at to do this, but obviously taking Hawkgirl out from between Constantine and Nightwing means that you have no buffer between those champions, and it makes it a lot harder to get both of them, which means you're going to have to make some tough decisions at some point prior to getting to those 2 champions in order to have enough anvils to go for them. And it also probably means that if you do go for both, one is going to be much more well built than the other. When Hawkgirl was in between those for servers 200 through 205, we had kind of the ability to take a break. I pulled my Hawkgirl to about 2 blue stars and stopped because I knew that there were going to be champions that I would want to go after a little bit more than her. I probably should have just not pulled her at all, to be honest with you. And I spend on the higher side of light spin. So I just want to point out that I may not be able to put out a new version of this bleed calendar before we figure out what's going on with Hawkgirl. And so if you are following this and you're trying to figure out what to do with the Hawkgirl situation, just know that she's probably okay to skip for pretty much every single one of these bleed recommendations except for the Justice League Superman family build and potentially free-to-play option number 2. Jumping into the actual recommendations, we have 2 that I would consider here in the middle more light spend or heavy light spend recommended builds, because in order to get to the point that I'm recommending you to try to get to, you are going to have to spend a decent amount of money on the game. In particular, the Legion of Doom Arkham's Most Wanted setup is going to cost a decent amount of money. Like, you're going to have to spend to be able to get that to a point where it actually works. It's unfortunate because that is probably one of the strongest setups in the entire game. But it's really more light spender and almost whale food to put together that sort of roster. You can see that there's also a Teen Titans Bat Family setup here that's for people who are willing to spend a little bit more money. It requires you to invest in a lot of the 10 shard mythics while you're waiting to get essentially your Nightwing and Starfire up and running so that your account works the way it should. So it means that you're going to be playing an account that's a little bit inefficient for a little while you're working your way up to that. Before we get any further and talk in detail about each one of these teams, I want to point a couple of things out. So we have our set of blue stars that are going to be in the bottom right of the champion portraits. That indicates that you should be taking that champion as high as you can. And so essentially, like if we look at our Superman here, kind of the first example, you should be spending every single anvil that you possibly can for the entire duration of his banner. And that's going to give you basically one champion that you can really kind of focus your roster around. So that's why I do that recommendation for either Superman or Joker in a lot of these builds. But for any champion that has those little blue stars, that's what I'm telling you, is that champion should be a focus of your account. For the purple star in the bottom right-hand corner of the champion portrait, that's indicating that you should be taking that champion to purple stars. So typically, I think 1 purple is kind of the best stopping point for a champion that you need to build for a specific team, but that is not going to be kind of the linchpin or like the primary damage dealer or, win condition for your team. And then we do have a couple of recommendations for white stars on here as well. So, that kind of, it's a bit obvious, but if I have a white star on a champion, that means that you should take that champion to white stars and you can safely stop there. The idea behind that is that you some of these champions, you need to have them just for their ultimate, but you don't necessarily have to have them built super high for the team to work. You just have to have them unlocked in the first place. Obviously, you'll see that Zatanna and Superboy are getting the white star designation. I think those are the only ones right now, but we're looking at a couple of other ones that might potentially fit that bill as well. I considered doing that with Scarecrow, but I really think you need to have a little bit more investment in him if you're going to pull him for your account. And the last couple of things that you'll see, the first one is going to be the red slash and the sort of transparent image of the champion. Clearly that indicates that you should be skipping that champion completely. Don't even pull for them at all. I suppose if you feel like you just have to be using anvils on a daily basis, you could use your daily anvil to pull on whatever bleeds that you're supposed to be skipping. That's really the most that I would do with it. And really, even then, you're going to take away the ability for you to pull for some of these other champions if you do that. Unfortunately, it's a bit inefficient on a daily basis, but it kind of has to be done if you want to get some of these champions where you want them to be. And the last thing that you'll notice on this guide is the sword and shield logo in the top left of the champion portrait. And that's indicating that you should be trying to build their unique legacy item. I tried to limit the amount of these that you're going to be going for on these builds because it's very difficult to get them. I've been a higher end light spender over the course of my playtime with my account, and I've been playing on this account since December 27th of 2024. So I've roughly been playing the game for about 6 months on this account, and I've only gotten about 850 or so magic eyes, maybe 900 of them. So I've essentially been able to purchase 4 unique legacy items. That's probably going to be on the higher end. Obviously, if you're free to play, you could expect to maybe get for sure 1, but maybe 2 legacy pieces, like unique legacy pieces, within the first 6 months of playing the game. So in that case, you're going to have to choose the 2 that are most important for you in each of these builds that I've recommended. That's basically everything you need to know in terms of trying to explain to you how all this is set up. And we can jump in and take a look at a few of these. So the first 2 teams, or the first 2 builds that I have to recommend to you at the top, these are builds that I think really reasonably anyone could go after them, whether you're free to play or light spend. I think you could push for these team comps, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I think that is. So you'll see that I've recommended on both of these that you pull Superman first. The first team is Justice League Dark and Teen Titans, and the second team is Justice League and Superman Family. So in both of these situations, you're going to be skipping a lot of champions to start out with, and you're going to need some sort of a champion that's going to kind of carry your account. That means that if you start on like a fresh server, you're going to have Superman for basically 30 days. You can pull on his banner, an entire month. Now you're going to be getting a decent amount of anvils and other resources to kind of kickstart your account within the first couple of weeks that you're building it up. So assuming you're following Supreme Commander as efficiently as you can, and you're able to get enough gems to go to Interstellar Visitor and get those 40 anvils a week, as well as some of the other anvils that you're able to acquire, it's reasonable to expect, if you're full on free to play, that you can get Superman to about 3 blue stars, maybe more if you're lucky, maybe less if you're unlucky, but you should be able to get to about that 2 to 3 blue star level, and that may be all that you're able to pull. Again, I said just get these champions as high as you can. Obviously, sometimes that means you're not going to get them too far, but that is more than enough to keep your account going for the next month or 2 while you're saving anvils and trying to basically hoard resources so that you can pull for the next set of champions. So with this Justice League Dark Teen Titans setup, obviously you're going to be kind of slow rolling into your Zatanna, Constantine, Nightwing banners, and you're going to need as many anvils as possible to get to this point. Now you can make a decision here. Basically, make the decision whether you want Constantine to be your best champion or if you want Nightwing to be the best champion for your roster. It's going to be a tough one, but I would personally recommend that you go for Zatanna and Constantine. It's a Justice League Dark is a really nice team, and you kind of get a decent amount of resources to build that team up. Like Wonder Woman, you're going to get like a free mythic upgrade for her. And Dr. Fate doesn't really require a lot of stars at all to kind of get him up and running. So it's really just Raven that's going to be an issue. And she's actually much more free to play accessible in the Meta Brawl store now with those 1,000 token shards that you're able to purchase. But again, if you're a huge Nightwing fan, obviously push for Nightwing and go for him. And Starfire, it's just going to take a lot longer for your account to get up and running if you do that. I've got some must build recommendations here. Again, if you're going Justice League Dark as your main build, you're going to have Wonder Woman, Dr. Fate, Raven. And then we're going to be trying to go for Teen Titans as the secondary build. So you'll definitely want to make sure that you have Cyborg. Batgirl is a must for Nightwing. You're going to be building Mira up to start with because you're not going to have access to any other healers. Robin is a champion to put a little bit of force into if you're able to get a couple of pulls of him. He definitely helps out getting that Bat Family and Teen Titans synergy for Nightwing. We have some low force needed champions, and really across the board for all of my recommendations, with Captain Cold's kit now working completely, his ultimate working, he's kind of a must include. He doesn't take much force investment whatsoever. It's just like one thing where he's got some energy gain that you want to invest into. And we also have Adam, who doesn't require any force or any investment whatsoever. Just having him on your roster is going to help you with some of those pesky training simulator nodes. So always good to have both of those champions. And then your optional, and really, I think these are ones that you could completely skip if you wanted to. But again, if you get a couple of copies for free, you might be able to use them. And that's Red Robin, Arsenal, and Red Hood. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend as much time on every single build talking through them, but you can see that for each build, we've got the bleed champions that I recommend you go for. We've got the must build ancillary champions that are going to help you get a couple of teams put together. We've got the low force needed champions, and then we have optional champions that you can pull or not, you can build or not build, just depending on what your roster looks like and how much money you're planning on spending, if any at all. For the Justice League Superman family team, this is one that is kind of very new because we just now have access to Supergirl and Superboy on the early servers, and they'll be rolling out to the rest of the servers over time. But this is one that I think is going to be quite popular, and I think it's going to be a pretty solid meta team to build for. You can see we got Crypto added in here as well. But I think both of those teams are going to give you a pretty solid build for the first 6 months you're playing the game. And the next two, I've already kind of talked about these a little bit, and we're moving down to some teams that are going to start utilizing some of the Arkham's Most Wanted and Legion of Doom champions. So we have this first one that I talked about a little bit, one of my favorite setups, which is the Arkham's Most Wanted Legion hybrid team that you're going to be building. So it's going to be Joker, Scarecrow, Deathstroke, Sinestro, and Poison Ivy. You could probably swap out, just not pull at all for Deathstroke and use Lex instead. But for the most part, you want to be pulling for all these champions, and that's why it's going to be high investment. And then obviously later on in the bleed, you're going to be skipping all the Superman family, all the Justice League Dark, so that you can focus in on, for your third team, you would be building the Nightwing, or kind of like the Teen Titans Bat Fam setup. The other kind of pseudo pay-to-win team is going to be your Teen Titans Bat Fam that I mentioned. We're going to start out with a fairly solid Arkham Legion setup. You're going to be getting a few champions to high blue stars or low purple stars probably. Obviously, you would be focusing on your Joker and Sinestro there. You can get your Scarecrow a little bit less built up to give you a little bit of an opportunity to ensure that you're getting Joker and Sinestro built fairly well. And then you'll kind of slow roll into Nightwing, and then obviously Starfire. Last and certainly not least is going to be the two free-to-play builds that I would recommend. So we have, they're both fairly similar, but one of them is going to be for people who would prefer Joker, and then one of them is going to be the Superman build. Free-to-play option number one, you're going to be focusing on Joker. He's going to give you a decent amount of viability in combat cycle early on, and we're going to be trying to build Sinestro as well. This one is going to be kind of tough because the recommendation is that you're trying to build 4 bleed champions in a row. It's kind of similar to that Arkham Legion setup. In order to help you through this, I've recommended that you pull your Zatanna just to 5 white. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a buffer between pulling for Sinestro and then Constantine and Nightwing. I've also reduced the recommendation for Nightwing down to the high blue, low purple star recommendation, and really just try to get as many copies of him as you can, because you're going to, the recommendation would be that you skip several bleed champions post Nightwing, and then make sure that you can pull your Starfire pretty high. So obviously the important part of building this free-to-play option number one is to make sure that you just have some decent pieces for several teams. There's going to be a lot more plug and play going on for these free-to-play options than it would for some of the other builds. And then free-to-play option number two is your Superman build. So you're going to be trying to focus in on Superman family eventually. Hopefully you can get some early crypto, so that's going to help you with building up your Superman and getting him to work as a win condition. But you're really going to go all out on Superman, skip the next 3 bleed champions, go for Sinestro, who is just going to be a great plug-and-play champion for really any team that you're putting out there. But he's definitely one that's going to get utilized along with your Justice League Dark team. I've actually heard some people who said that they, and I do this too actually, will just swap out Zatanna for Sinestro. So you could even make the choice to not even pull for Zatanna at all and just kind of use Sinestro as the 5th on your Justice League Dark team. You're not going to get the full synergy, obviously, that you don't get that 5th piece with Zatanna, but it's certainly an option. And then obviously you're going to skip Nightwing and go for Supergirl and Superboy at a much lower star level. The idea of free-to-play option number two is to help people who aren't as good as min-maxing their account, or who are just a little bit more casual, to still pull some of the champions that are going to give them a decent chance at scoring well and helping their league out. This one has probably the lowest requirement for pulling of any of them that I'm giving you a recommendation for. There are only 2 champions that you should be going all out for and trying to get their legacy pieces for, and that's really Superman and Constantine. I do recommend you try to get Supergirl's legacy piece here, but it's not quite as important as Superman and Constantine. So definitely just wanted to give people a couple of options that will help them feel like they're making meaningful progress in the game over time. I'm going to wrap up this video. I know it was a little bit long-winded, but I really like to go as far into the weeds as I possibly can on things like this. There's a lot going on with this graphic, and I just want people to be able to have a visual guide, kind of like a walkthrough that they can use if they want to go along with the guide, to help them understand kind of what the reasoning is behind some of these selections. If you like this guide and want to help me make improvements to it, definitely leave comments below. Shoot me a DM on Discord. I want to hear some of your feedback so that we can make this better the next time that I put an iteration of it out. But I really hope that this helps people feel like there's still a bleed calendar around. We're going to do our best to make do with what we have. I know we don't have the one on the official Discord, but hopefully this will be a halfway reasonable replacement for that. If you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll consider doing so. You'll get notified anytime there is new DC Dark Legion content on my channel, and I will see you on the next video.